Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Building an Inuit Art Center in the South with Dr. Stephen Borys. My name is Judith Newman, graduate of the University of Winnipeg Class of 71 and current president of the University of Winnipeg Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you today to our second speaker series event of 2021. Thank you for taking time to be with us. The University of Winnipeg Alumni Association is pleased to co-host this event with the university's Faculty of Graduate Studies. Joining us today will be an introduction to Indigenous Studies class with instructor Charlene Moore, and we welcome them to our event. It's always a pleasure to provide an opportunity to highlight our accomplished alumni and find out about their personal story, what influence the university may have had on them, what inspired them and has led to their success, and what wisdom they can impart to present-day students. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Stephen Borys, the director and CEO of the Winnipeg Art Gallery and Kaumaiyark. He holds an executive MBA, a PhD in art and architectural history from McGill University, an MA in art history from the University of Toronto, and most importantly to us, a BA Honors from the University of Winnipeg. Dr. Borys currently holds an adjunct professorship at the University of Winnipeg, where he teaches in the History and Business and Administration Department. He was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012, Tourism Winnipeg's Leader of the Year, and Downtown Winnipeg Biz Leadership in the Arts Award in 2015, and the province's highest honor, the Order of Manitoba in 2020. It's my distinct pleasure now to introduce Dr. Stephen Borys.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Dr. Dorothy Young and Charlene Moore. It's a pleasure being invited to speak to the University of Winnipeg Alumni Association. I would like to first acknowledge that the Wag Kaumaiyark is located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. I have great fondness for the University of Winnipeg in many ways. Of course, I did my undergraduate there and now teach in an adjunct capacity in the history and business schools, and find myself very connected to the campus. On the course I teach is a graduate and senior undergraduate seminar called The Idea of the Museum. And I can tell you, I teach for one reason, it's to learn. And there has not been a year go by where I haven't learned something from the discussions, the students, and their presentations. I'd like to dedicate this talk in memory of one of my history professors, Professor Fulmer Vincent Rutherford. And I would like to acknowledge the support I received from Dr. and Professor David Topper, who was one of my art history professors. You know, beyond painting lessons from my mother as a child, high school art classes, visits to the WAG, Manitoba Museum, local galleries, my formal introduction to art history came as an undergraduate at the University of Winnipeg. And of course, long before that, as a kid, I used to love walking home from school, particularly in the winter month when it would get dark at 4. And I loved walking and looking into people's big picture windows to see what they hung over their sofa. Perhaps that was my first kind of exercise as an art history professor. After my first year, and after my first art history course, which was taught by Dr. Topper, it was entitled Art and Ideas. Right after that, I spent the summer abroad working and studying. And then I returned to school in the fall and decided to switch my major and did a double major in history and art history. Years later, Dr. Topper was actually one of the external examiners for my PhD dissertation at McGill. There's two parts to this talk. The first part is more formal. Maybe it's just the academic side of me. The second part is going to be literally a PowerPoint presentation walking you through Kaumaiyark. So if you bear with me and don't mind looking at me for the next 15 minutes or less, just like to share really what is the model for Comac, which is the model for the new museum. You know, in my third year at U of W, I remember going to a lecture at the university, at the WAG, and it just so happened it was given by John Kennedy. And John Kennedy was the New York Times art critic. And he happened to be the author of the modern art textbook that I was using in class. And so, of course, right after the talk, I got him to sign it. But he actually concluded his address that evening by quoting that well-known expression, "I don't know much about art, but I know what I like." And he said, the next time you hear someone say that, stop them, because you can only like or dislike what you know or what you've been exposed to. So before you say, "I don't like that cultural object or that piece of art," think about what you know about it. And that has kind of inspired me to expand, to share really the story of art and culture in our lives. You know, the great communicator Marshall McLuhan said, "Art at its most significant is a distant early warning system that can always be relied on to tell the old culture what is beginning to happen." You all know that art is perhaps the oldest universal language, one of the first and last ways we communicate with each other. And you know, before letters, vocabulary, words, even dialects, there has been a visual means in which thoughts, emotions, and ideas are documented. And while it's not always easily defined or understood, whether it's a form, a color, a gesture, a physical expression, for centuries, art has been really the cultural expression of humankind. You know, it's a dynamic, it's a living force. It can shape our ideas, our perspectives. It can get us to change, to rethink. And in this vibrant global exchange, let's call it the cultural democracy, the museum is really the forum. Pew Charitable Trust and The Economist published some numbers in 2012 and 2019. In 2019, in the United States, 850 million people went to museums in 1 year. That is more than all theme park and major sporting events attendance combined. Just think about that. 850 million people going to museums every year. That could be a history museum, a science museum. But what's interesting, the biggest chunk of that visitorship is the K-12 audience. And that is a very powerful message, tool, responsibility when it comes to the public trust and what we share in museums. You know, we live in an image-saturated society environment where you can access, zoom in on any world masterwork on your smartphone, your iPhone, your tablet. You can actually see something better than you could in the museum. But still, 10 million people every year wait in line, wait in the queues and the crowds behind the stanchions to look at Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa at the Louvre. 10 million people a year. So obviously the object still has a draw. So whether it's a painting in the gallery, the museum, or the one you hang over your sofa, an elementary school show, the exchange of objects between diplomats, public art commissions, community art show, or the latest acquisition at the WAG, art penetrates all sectors, all faces of our society. And we may only understand part of the picture, but you cannot deny its impact. So 13 years ago, I accepted the post of director and CEO of the WAG. The WAG happens to be one of the oldest civic art museums in the country. It was established in 1912. And I remember the board at the interview asked two things of me. Could I lead the WAG into its centennial year, which was 2012? And could I build the Inuit Gallery, the Inuit Center? One thing I can tell you is this project, building Kamiuk, has changed me. It's been a life-changing, a career-changing, and a museum-changing project. It's a project for the new century. It's a template for the museum. and it responds clearly to the Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action for museums. It's safe to say that museum directors are often drawn to a job because of a great collection, a great building, a great mission. And I fall into those categories, but really what has inspired me the most coming back to Winnipeg is the opportunity to create something that will help move the WAG, the community forward, to secure its place in what we call the community, and to be part of this journey of reconciliation. You all know the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, but a couple years before the construction project started, there was a change, a corporate change. It was the change in the name of the museum. What was first called the Canadian Museum of Human Rights became the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. One word, and the power of advocacy was activated. And this is not unlike the story of the Inuit Arts Center. This is the story of a museum we call Kamayuk. You know, while we were developing the program for Kamayuk, I had a call from the editor-in-chief of Canadian Art magazine. And he had 3 questions for me. He said, what should a museum look like in the future? How will we get there? And what is standing in our way for the new museum of the 21st century? And I answered those questions, and I'll share with you my answers. What does this new museum look like? It's a creative, it's an evolving, accessible, welcoming, respectful conversation. It's a dialogue, it's a forum. How do we get there? Through open dialogue led by the values and stories that honor and reflect the whole community of stakeholders and constituents. And what's in our way? Really, only the traditions and templates that we have used for decades to define and guide us in this sector. This is what must change in order to foster new voices, ideas, if we want to be meaningful, relevant, present, and around for the next century. So this extraordinary building, which you can't miss driving down Memorial or St. Mary's, it's called Kamayuk. It was designed by Michael Malton, one of North America's leading and illustrious architects. And he's known for creating spaces and communities that shape our experience, that respond to what's around us. Michael Malton, who works out of Los Angeles, was selected through an international competition. There were 125 expressions of interest, 65 formal submissions from 13 countries for the Inuit Arts Center. And it was a unanimous vote from the committee that Michael won. And in part, I'd like to say he won because he asked us questions we even hadn't considered, questions we didn't have the answers for, at least then. And once awarded the commission to build the new Inuit Arts Center, Michael and I embarked on a journey, a physical journey, an intellectual journey, a journey of reconciliation, committed to this creation of progressive, transformative architecture. Michael Malton and his team are dedicated to the design and construction of projects that engage the community through real exploration and dialogue. You know, as I watched the Inuit Arts Center go up over the last 3 years, I often thought about this idea of a museum. What is it? Not just what it looks like, but how does it feel, communicate, function? Is it welcoming? Will it be accessible? And you know, and through program development, stakeholder development, architectural design, the capital campaign, the building project, the construction, I have been inspired and challenged to really reconsider the template for museums today, and one that is right for us, for Winnipeg, for Canada, and one that responds truthfully, respectfully to the TRC's calls to actions. I'm not sure if you know this, but the WAG holds the world's largest collection of contemporary Inuit art. There is close to 14,000 works, just Inuit. Plus there's another 7,500 on long-term loan. We have produced over 160 exhibitions. We've published over 70 publications on the subject of Inuit art. You might say that is unprecedented and that is reason enough to build what we've just built, but it isn't. Really to celebrate the art, to honor the people, the cultures, the land who have created these pieces, we began a dialogue, a journey with the Indigenous community, with the North, with the Inuit, and we call it Kamayuk. Kamayuk means it is bright, it is lit. And this project is not just about sending light out, it's about being illuminated from within, being transparent, being exposed, and being willing to share what perhaps has not been shared in the past. So this new building, which I'm about to share with you, it's still a building, but its infrastructure is much greater than any form or edifice. Advancing beyond, but not neglecting things like collecting, preserving, and exhibiting, this museum is about dialogue. It's about exploration, understanding, listening, rethinking, reshaping our lives and our perspectives, particularly when it comes to Inuit art. Learning and advancement contribute to this enterprise, but they're augmented by enrichment, enjoyment, and really what is the overall pursuit of health, well-being through art and culture. I'd like to think that WAG Kamayuk responds to and is the community. It is the collection of objects, ideas, and people. It reflects cultures and stories that look back and forward. It's a place where the acts of invitation, of welcome, and engagement thrive. They must thrive. This is a place about stories, about people and ideas. Connected to the North, it's really a conversation. Yes, it's for exhibitions, for research, for learning, for studio work, for art making, but let's not forget about it being a bridge, an enabler, helping people from the North, from the South to meet, to learn, to work together. I like to think of it as a gathering place, which is defined by Indigenous principles and voices, with the art serving as the lens on the Arctic, on Inuit culture. Sometimes we use this word transformative, and I don't like to use it loosely, but I believe Kamayuk is truly a transformative place. Now, it might be hard for me to convince you of that because it's closed right now. But I know when you walk through the doors of Kamayuk, it not only will change perhaps your perception, your understanding, your idea of Inuit art, what you thought about it, what you knew, what you didn't know, but it will also hopefully change what you think the role of the museum is in our community. You'll see galleries, you'll see the largest visible vault in the world. You'll see fabulous research spaces, library, classrooms, studios. And they all are facilitating a new way to learn, to understand, to be inspired. Now remember, Kamayuk is right next to the WAG. How do you build right next to that building? Well, the development of Kamayuk is grounded in strong partnerships with Indigenous and non-Indigenous stakeholders. People have come together to learn, to teach, to tell stories, to guide us. And this is led largely by the Indigenous Advisory Circle, made up of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultural leaders, artists, curators from across the country within Manitoba, helping us, pushing us, challenging us to do more, to respond to the TRC. And I believe you will see this in what we exhibit, what we program, and how we reach out. Art has a way to get us to think critically, to act. It helps us rethink what our neighbor is, who our neighbor is. Maybe rethink a perspective that we didn't understand. In fact, it touches us. It gets us to look within, outside, to understand each other. It sparks change. And at its core, it's about connecting people to each other. What is the most exciting part of this project is this word, kamayuk. It is bright, it is lit. And let me just tell you before we switch to some images. The Indigenous Advisory Circle, one of their final tasks before the building opened was to name the Inuit Art Center and all the public spaces. And so the circle named a very specific naming circle of Indigenous leaders and elders, those who are endowed with the responsibility to name. And this also responds specifically to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 13, and the TRC's calls to action number 14, the naming of a building respecting Indigenous culture. And I was invited as a settler, as a non-Indigenous CEO, to sit with the elders and the naming circle over the last summer. It was one of the most powerful, transformative, humbling experiences in my life as a museum director. And the group represented the 4 regions of Inuit and Nangat, the territories and peoples, the Indigenous peoples within Manitoba, recognizing that our building is on Treaty 1, Métis homeland, the unceded territory of Dakota. Kamayuk, it is bright, it is lit. In addition, the circle gifted a name for the Winnipeg Art Gallery, Bindigan Bewasia, which means, come on in, the dawn of light is here. Those are words, but for us, they're actions. They're a call to action. Now I want to show you how this is all embodied. And I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to. Do you all see an iceberg? Sweet. Okay. Thank you, Dorothy. Now do you see the WAG? Winnipeg Art Gallery. How do you build next to this structure? Built in 1971, a very important building. Our first building on the corner of Main and Water, it's 1912. That building is now torn down. It's a federal building. Some of you will know this building, which is now the Manitoba Archives, former Winnipeg Auditorium, which is right kitty corner from the WAG. That was our second home from 1934 to 1971. There is the site for the new Winnipeg Art Gallery back in 1969, 70. You can see the ledge. And there, this amazing monolithic limestone-clad building going up. You know, this picture was taken, you can tell by the vehicles, it was taken 40 years ago. But what's wonderful about this Winnipeg Art Gallery is its timeless architecture. The reason we're building Kamayuk, you might say, is because we have a collection unprecedented, unrivaled in the world of Inuit art. But we know it's more than that. At the beginning of the project, I was invited by the Getty Museum Leadership Institute in Los Angeles to be part of an international colloquium for 3 weeks. You take a critical challenge, and mine was, what is an Inuit Art Center? You had to pick one object from your collection that kind of embodied the project. I picked this bird shaman, designed, made by Luke Ixitarek from Baker Lake. For me, it's one of the most transformative, uplifting works in our collection. It's actually caribou antler. It graced the cover of our Guide to the Collections. And it comes alive with the kids who understand art is truly something that they can embrace. This project is about kids. It's about the generation that will follow us, that will tell stories, but that will understand Inuit art is much more than an object in a case. It's a voice, it's a life, it's a message, it's communication. I've had the privilege of traveling extensively through the North. These kids are really no different than those kids. These are kids right on the Arctic Circle in Penguin. This actually is at midnight in July, where literally there's about 1 hour of darkness. Those kids play just like our kids in the South. They go to school. How do we bring the North down to the South for the K-12s? I had the privilege with my wife taking our son up to the Arctic, Roman on the left, and there he was with David, a boy his age, a girl his age, kilometers apart, but by connected by a love, a respect, and understanding of the power of art. Michael Maltzin won the competition, a huge challenge ahead of him. How do you build? There's the site before the new building went up. You can see the Winnipeg Art Gallery. Michael's first, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? We're going to travel. Michael and I traveled to Europe to look at new museum projects with large collections, important trips to Berlin, to Paris, to London. But what changed him was the visit to the Arctic. Michael brought his wife, his kids. I was joined by Darlene White, our curator, George Sibinal, the associate architect, and Ewan Bond, the photographer. And we traveled to these communities. You can see we went to Rankin, to Iqaluit, to Cape Dorset, and Pangerton. These are some of Ewan Bond's photographs taken of the land that began to influence the shape of this building, whether it's the topography, the color, the snow, the ice, the coastlines, and the people. Probably my favorite shot of Michael with Elizabeth Schuletic, really the matriarch, the elder of the community of Pangerton. Elizabeth passed about 4 years ago, and Elizabeth gave him a thumbs up to go ahead. The project for Michael was not just a career-changing, it was a life-changing project for Michael and his 2 children and his wife, Amy. Art has a way of changing us, of moving us, of inspiring us. That's the picture that used to be on Michael's screen, his screen grab, in terms of what could you try to bring to the South from the North? And it's this landscape, this vista, this horizon that he wanted to capture in his building. His first sketch of a form, an idea that could respond. This is Michael's studio in LA to give you an idea of the number of iterations and models he went to try to build next to the Winnipeg Art Gallery. And there you see a different scaled model. The thought that went into trying to build a structure to embody a voice, an image. And there you have the final rendering. I'm happy to say that 2,100 little sedum plants are being planted, I think, as we speak. So that landscape will be fully realized in the next few days. So this is Kamayuk. How did it start? It started with the groundbreaking, a very, very special day where politicians of every stripe, every perspective came together. Federal, provincial, municipal, Indigenous leaders appointed, elected to say this project is a way to unite. You know, I love the fact that you could have liberals, conservatives, NDP, independents, all together saying, you know what, this is worth investing in for the community. You might have watched this project go up just the same way we watched 50 years ago, the Winnipeg Art Gallery go up. It's a building, yes. It's clad in, I want to point out, that white stone is a Bethel white granite, okay? Now, the next time you go to Portage in Maine and you see the former Bank of Montreal building, which is now the Manitoba Métis Federation building, it's the same quarry in Vermont that this stone comes from. And I think it's a wonderful complement to the Tyndall stone of the WAG building. on a very cold day with a blue sky. And now I'm going to show you a series of images. These images of the finished building were all documented by Winnipeg photographer Lindsay Reed. The renderings I'll show you are all produced by Michael Maltzen. And there you have that new U of W building, residence going up right behind us on the left. That's also designed by Michael Maltzen. In the front, you have two extraordinary sculptures. You have the limestone bears by Abraham Rubin, and then you have Gouda Ashuna's piece on the left. But let's go inside this building. Now that's the rendering of Michael Maltzen. I love how it comes to life here. And there you see a shot back in February. Kamayuk, which means it is bright, it is lit, has a way of illuminating not just the art, the sidewalk, the light outside, and it lights our lives. I love the fact that you can have the largest visible vault in the world. You can have a gathering place. You can have a theater lecture space, and it's all exposed from the outside. For the first time, visitors will get a glimpse in before they go through our doors. We want to make the WAG Kamayuk as accessible as possible. I think of the hundreds, probably thousands of people that live in our city that have walked by the WAG and have not felt comfortable or welcome or inspired to go inside. And how do you change that? I believe you do it with light, with a welcome, and with real accessibility. There's Michael's rendering of what is the largest visible vault. It's a 3-story vault. It rises up 2 stories, goes down 1 story. And there you have it, a similar perspective. Right now it houses over 5,000 carvings. There's another rendering of the vault. You can see where it descends 1 full story there. And there you see there's a glass floor that goes around the vault that you can actually look down to the lower level. The fact that most of these carvings are stone allows us to exhibit with natural light. And as you walk around the vault, you actually do a tour of the north. The vault is organized by community. So right in front of you in the middle, you have the ceramics from Rankin Inlet. When you move to the left, you have the green serpentinite of Cape Dorset, and so on. Cafe on the main floor. I'm going to just show you a couple images. The cafe. You walk down the corridor to the shop, the gallery shop. I'm showing you this because the shop now has its own entrance, and this may seem, well, of course it should. But I think of those people who have walked by our building for years and never felt, wow, why would I go inside? I love the fact that retail might be the best threshold to engage someone. And the fact that you have a cafe, a theater, films, all on the main floor, which is all free to the public, free to Indigenous, free to everyone under 25, is a chance for you to really experience what is the new museum model. It's about the art, but it's about so much more. There's Michael's rendering of the vault on the right, and you have the learning steps on the left. And there you can see those steps that take you all the way up 4 levels. And to the left is this extraordinary theater. Now there's a rendering by Michael, and there you have the new theater. 90 seats, it's a smart classroom. We could connect a group of kids here to a kids in Rankin Inlet, to a Iqaluit. Research, learning on the 2nd level, the mezzanine level, you can see it through the window where our libraries or holdings are. It's a space for a classroom. This fall, I hope to be teaching there. Continuing on, you come up to the galleries level. Remember that every level of Kamayuk is connected to the WAG, so it's completely ambulatory. Okay, remember this shot? That's that picture that's taken up in Iqaluit. And Michael said to me when he took it, how can we transport that to the south? And this is what he's done. There's his rendering. to capture a museum space that's unique in the world. This is the largest gallery dedicated to contemporary Indigenous art in North America. And there is another rendering. There you have it today. 30-foot ceilings, 8,000 square feet exhibition space, 22 skylights that bring in this amazing quality of light. There you're seeing it. The mezzanine level, and of course, the show you're seeing here is Inuit, which is not just transformative, but it is unprecedented. 4 Inuit curators that represent the Inuit Inangat, led by Dr. Heather Gliliorte, have come together to give us the largest exhibition of Inuit art on record. You see those spaces. Those skylights let in this amazing quality of light, allowing us not just to illuminate the objects, but for ourselves to be lit by this natural light. The rooftop now, the whole penthouse level, is dedicated to art making classrooms. There are 2 renderings, and now you're seeing the new penthouse level, 7 new studios that fulfill the Manitoba School curriculum for arts and culture, K-12, for adults, for learning, for everyone. There's our clay studio. There's Michael's attempt at snow. And there you go, is Kamayuk. Now I just want to end with not art, but the people behind this project. We adopted the mantra, art is a voice, for this project, because I believe the voices that are heard now, some have never been heard before, and it's creating a momentum, an outreach that is truly revolutionary in terms of empowering the museum to do more. There is a snapshot of the WAG's Indigenous Advisory Circle. There's one guy there, but it's really amazing women from across the country representing the 4 regions of Inuit, but also the key Indigenous communities, First Nations and Métis within Manitoba. They have guided us for the last 4 years. They have inspired us, they've challenged us, they've counseled us. This circle is chaired by 2, some you may know. On the left is Dr. Heather Gliliorte, the lead curator. She's also a professor at Concordia, and Dr. Julie Nagam, who of course was the first co-chair with the WAG and the University of Winnipeg in the history of Indigenous art in North America. I spoke about those 4 curators who put together Inuit. There they are, actually, they're lined up geographically from west to east, from Inuvialuit to Nunatsiavut. And they were the ones leading this project, never been done anywhere. There you have the first Inuit task force sitting on a skidoo in our galleries, the people that have helped us, guided us. If I could tell you about the stories, the conversations we've had over the last 5 years with people that have cared and loved, respected this project, when their voices are heard. We've sat at tables across the country being challenged to rethink the model for the museum. We've met with legislature assemblies. This is with the Premier of Nunavut and part of his cabinet in Iqaluit, an Indigenous Youth Advisory Circle, particularly with Inuit leadership, telling us what they want in a museum, looking at the objects, the artists from every Inuit community, telling us what they would like to see in a museum in the South, how they would like to see their art, their voices, their stories heard, respected. Inuit elders saying, you have the okay, we support this project, we trust you, and we believe in your project. You remember that bird shaman, the image I took to the Getty Museum in LA, that really started the project for me. If there was one image that sums up the project for me, it's a drawing by Luke Unguhadluk from Baker Lake. It's a drum dance. In a way, this is an organizational chart. But what's wonderful about it, everyone has an equal say at the table. And voices that were excluded before, silenced before, forgotten, are there at the table. And you know, as a drawing, as a design, it's incredibly beautiful, elegant, and it works. This is how we built the Inuit Arts Center, with circles and circles. I found this image. That was my graduation day at U of W. And I think my mom took it in front of the ledge. I've given tons of talks over the years, but the talk I was giving today, I was actually a little nervous because I'm speaking at the university that really set the course for my post-secondary education, for the way I thought about what education can do in one of the most illuminating, transformative, and progressive undergraduate schools in the country. Yes, we have some graduate programs at UW, but I love to think of the power of the undergraduate education and what UW gave me. This is what it's all about. This is about the K-12 curriculum, what kids will learn, see, understand when they come into the WAG for the first time, when they come into Kamaya. What will they take home? What will they share with their friends? It is truly a voice. Art is a voice. It has taught me a great deal, and it's helped me lead. It's helped me follow and to facilitate a conversation that's going on just a few blocks from the University of Winnipeg. Thank you. I haven't left you much time, but I'm happy. I know someone's going to be facilitating some questions.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you so very much for your unbelievably inspiring presentation and incredible pictures, and your enthusiasm and the building itself is just so inspiring. At this time, we would like to accept questions from the audience, and I will turn things over to Dr. Dorothy Young. She's a member of our Alumni Council and a council representative on the University Board of Regents. She'll be our moderator for the question and answer portion of this hour. Dr. Young.
Thank you very much, Judith. I'm also a graduate of the University of Winnipeg. Got my Bachelor of Arts degree there in bits and pieces. I was working full-time as a teacher, and I went at nights and summer school. So not like some of the students that are on with us today who are full-time students. I do. Stephen, you have a great presentation, and anybody who wants to ask a question, if you pose it in the chat, I'll be able to ask Stephen the questions. You reminded me of something, Stephen, though, in your presentation. My father worked in the construction industry in Winnipeg, and he was in the company that built the new art gallery in the 70s. So I looked for lots of fossils in that limestone.
Well, it's hard to believe that building is 50 years old.
Yeah, I know. I won't tell you how old I am. I'm forever young.
That was bird construction.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that the Canadian Museum for Human Rights was designed by an architect who won the competition, very stiff competition, and he was from New Mexico. And the architect that you chose after the competition was also from the United States. You have any advice to our families?
You know, it's a good question. And, you know, I actually was talking to the architect of the Winnipeg Art Gallery, Gustavo de Rosa. And that was an international competition. Of course, Gus de Rosa Portuguese Canadian. But what's interesting, talking to the Indigenous Advisory Circle, they truly believe this was an international project because Inuit art transcends even Canadian borders. You know, in a way, I was really hoping for a Canadian architect. And of course, the associate is a Canadian, that is George Sibonall, Sibonall Architecture. But what I do love about Michael Malton coming in, he took it to also an international scale. It allowed us to transcend borders and geographies and understand this is truly a world-class project. And deserving of any architect from around the world to come in. And I believe he has given us something that's more than just a building.
Okay, so from the chat, what are some of the challenges working to follow the TRC?
The Winnipeg Art Gallery is very much a colonial institution. The very structure of how we collect, how we exhibit, how we publish, even what the WAG is made up of in terms of staff and board, is very much based on a colonial framework. And as much as we have done amazing things with the collection for the last 70 years, much of what we produce have been by non-Indigenous specialists, curators, educators, researchers. Not to discard that, but to simply open up the dialogue even further so that the primary voice would be an Indigenous voice, would be the Inuit voice. So the fact right now, responding to the TRC calls to action for museums, our curatorial team at the WAG is actually split evenly between Indigenous and non-Indigenous curators. We have made very specific mandate and guidelines in terms of collecting. Whenever we organize an Inuit exhibition, there must be an Inuit curator involved. Clearly, there's a great deal of work to be done, much to be dismantled, to be rethought. But I do believe with the Indigenous Advisory Circle, with the Indigenous members of our team at all levels, from the executive to the curatorial to the board, that we are on the right track. And it is a lifelong endeavor, reconciliation. And we are seeing the results. We have a long way to go, but I can tell you the very specific calls to action from the TRC in terms of how you hire, how you collect, how you budget accordingly, the naming of an institution, how you publish, and you can actually interpret these calls. When we do it, when we respond, the results have been truly extraordinary.
Excellent. Okay. Somebody's asking, I'd love to know more about that amazing vault, the stone sculpture next to the window and some light. How about the other sculptures? How are they stored, and are they visible to the public in a similar way? And is everything out of the vault on display?
We cannot exhibit everything permanently, and I tell you for the one reason, light, humidity control. For instance, of the WAG's collection of Inuit art, there's about 14,000 objects, about 8,000 are carvings. Right now, there's approximately 5,500 of those carvings on permanent display in the visible vault. And that visible vault also it's been fully digitized. So when you do come in, we'll be installing these kiosks, which have screens that allow you to actually access every object that's on display, and you can find out more about them. There are objects, and I think one of your writers, one of the participants talk about this, antler and bone, ivory, which are very light sensitive, cannot be exhibited long-term. And then non-3D objects, for instance, textiles, drawings and prints, they have to be rotated. So they'll be exhibited in several of the galleries. But because the stone is incredibly resilient, we're able to at least exhibit the bulk of that long-term.
Okay. Anybody can ask a question in here. Lots of people are saying great presentation, Stephen. Thank you so much. And what brought you back to Winnipeg?
Why wouldn't you come back to Winnipeg? I can tell you, we were living, after my undergraduate, I studied at U of T and at McGill. I got my first job. I was a curator at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. Then I went to Cleveland, Oberlin. I was teaching at Oberlin College. I met my wife there. Our son was born in Oberlin. Then we traveled to Sarasota, Florida, where I was working at the Ringling Museum. So why would anyone leave Sarasota to come to Winnipeg? 3 reasons: family, a great city and a great project. And came back, the best move I made of my life. It's fabulous for our son to be around family. Winnipeg is a fabulous city, and this project and the diversity of our city and this moment in the history of Canada, it's an incredible opportunity for museum directors. So it's great to be here. And you know,
So you were the right person for the job.
it's easy to say what I've been able to accomplish, but I couldn't have done any of it without the support of all of those directors and curators and board members and staff that came before me. I think of Dr. Eckhart in the 1950s, who first began collecting Inuit art. And I think of every director after Dr. Eckhart pushing this idea. And so by the time I arrived, it was pretty easy. And on my side, I will say this moment in Canada, with the TRC, with the calls to action, with awareness of reconciliation, of indigenization, decolonization, this was the perfect project. And thanks to federal support, provincial, municipal, and an amazing private sector support, we've been able to build Kamayuk.
Okay, two other questions. There's a lot of white space there that looks like there's a lot of opportunity to put more art out. Will that disrupt the display? And the second question, which isn't related, but I'll give them to you. Memories from your time at the University of Winnipeg and the spaces you were in, the profs you had.
Oh, fabulous question. So there's lots of space at the WAG, lots of space for art. I will say this, for us, it's a bit of a journey, and we want to find out what people want to see. I love the idea that the whole main floor of the WAG is open and free. So you could come in, grab a coffee at the cafe, hang out, check your emails, meet someone, do some shopping, check out a film in the theater, look at the vault. For me, it's about a space, and art is critical, but it's not just about the art. And then, of course, there's 4 levels to Kamayuk. So there's thousands of square feet for different types of exhibitions. And of course, the visible vault is one way to look at the collection. So you're going to see a diversity of installations over the next months and year. U of W, oh, I had a fabulous 4 years there. And, you know, I actually wanted to go into law school. And I remember thinking of the courses you need to take. And then it was Dr. Topper's course in my first year, Art and Ideas. It was focused on Vincent van Gogh. And I remember my dad sent my mom and I to an exhibition in Toronto at the AGO of Van Gogh. That summer, I worked and studied in Great Britain and Ireland. And I came back, and I remember going to see Dr. Topper and saying, you know what? I kind of want to pursue art history. And it just started that process. And I think of the professors. I think of my undergraduate seminar with Dr. Rutherford, Dr. Herb Mays. I also did a minor in psychology. What I loved about the University of Winnipeg, it's downtown. It's truly connected to the fabric of our community. Mm-hmm. And you go outside the door, you meet someone, and museums are bubbles, universities are bubbles, and sometimes we're removed, remote from the greater community. But I find the way UW is built, designed, the way it's growing respectfully within the community, that students there are exposed to more than their professors, more than their classes. They're exposed to the people they live amongst, they work amongst, and study amongst. It's also kind of penetrable, and that's the same way a museum should be. So when I was deciding to teach at the University of Winnipeg, I asked the dean and the chair of the history department, can I teach at the WAG? And they said, yeah. So I love the fact that students do that 10-minute walk, they come to the WAG when we can, pre and post COVID, and just that little walk reminds them that the academy is within the greater community. And I think it's very important to remember the role the university plays in inspiring and challenging and welcoming even the non-academic community, those we live amongst and those we live within. I
What
love the
what
library.
advice, okay, what advice do you have to the students that are at the University of Winnipeg today for their
Um,
future?
just before you think you know what profession you want to pursue, leave the door open. The university education, particularly the undergraduate education in Canada, is incredible. Not only is tuition still quite affordable, I know it's going up, but compared to a lot of American schools, it is an amazing investment. I love talking to students today, asking them to expose themselves to as many disciplines as they can within the first or 2 years. Because I know there's prerequisites to go into medicine, to go into dental school, to go into engineering, to go into law. And you have to hit those prerequisites, but try to keep your options open and take a course that you wouldn't think of taking if it was outside of your required curriculum. And I found it was Dr. Topper's art history course that made me realize, wow, you know what? There is a profession there. And I love the way students at University of Winnipeg volunteer. Yes, we have to have jobs. We have to pay for our tuition. We have to pay for lodgings and food, transport. But if you can volunteer somewhere, oftentimes I've had students volunteer at the WAG and they've ended up getting contracts, being hired, getting scholarships and larger projects where they're paid. But sometimes it's that first volunteer opportunity that looks great on a resume and maybe you weren't paid, but it will open another door. And I truly believe that's the case. Not only is volunteerism important for the community, for our well-being, but it'll help the undergraduate student be exposed to just a little more.
That's excellent advice, Stephen. And I think we're just about out of time because I know Judith wants to wrap up, but I wanted to say something about Kamayak. You are bright and you are lit. Thank you so much for being the leader. Over to you, Judith.
Thank you so much. Well, you finished off better than I am by saying that. And how I really endorse what you've just said. I'd like to extend my thanks on behalf of the University of Winnipeg Alumni Association to Dr. Borys for first accepting our invitation to share his personal journey with us and for his wonderful and inspiring words. I am now going to take an art history course and volunteer at WAG. There's no doubt about it. He has proven in his work that art is a universal language that has the power to build understanding, respect, and reconciliation. And we wish you continued success in your endeavors as you go forward. Thank you also to Dorothy for your excellent moderator skills. And one final note, this presentation has been videotaped and it will be available for viewing shortly on our special video online outlet. For if you know someone who would have liked to have heard this amazing presentation and seen those amazing pictures, pass the word on that it is available to be viewed after the fact. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And finally, please remember to stay safe and well. Thank you so much.